Today on the Locked On Blues podcast, it is finally time to revisit the Ryan O'Reilly trade because Tage Thompson has turned into a bona fide star for the Buffalo Sabres. I think he's at 33 goals this season. Looked great in his game against the Blues the other night. A lot of people on Twitter were calling this trade an L for the St. Louis Blues, which we'll get into that. And then after that, we're going to be talking about the back-to-back coming up this weekend. The St. Louis Blues take on division rival Minnesota Wild, likely playoff opponent, and then likely other playoff foe battling with a spot for them is the Nashville Predators, who they play on Sunday. Huge back-to-back. We'll get into all that and more. Make sure you stay tuned.
You're Locked On Blues, your daily podcast on the St. Louis Blues. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Locked On Blues podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and your number one source for daily Blues content. I'm Josh Hyman, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Thomas Welch. We got a busy episode for you guys today, starting things off talking about revisiting the Ryan O'Reilly trade because it has been in the news a lot lately as Tage Thompson continues to have his breakout season for the Buffalo Sabres. So we'll be talking about that. And then in segment 2, we're going to be going into Saturday's matinee game between the St. Louis Blues and Minnesota Wild. And then in segment 3, we're going to be talking about the Sunday afternoon game between the St. Louis Blues and Nashville Predators. Busy episode, busy weekend. First, I want to thank anyone and everyone out there for making Locked On Blues your first listen because we are free and available on all podcast platforms. All right, so I'm going to see if I can remember this off the top of my head, Tommy.
Off the dome.
Couple seasons ago, Pierre LeBrun tweeted out 4 words that I really enjoyed, and it was Ryan O'Reilly to STL. And then we sat there in silence for 15 minutes, awaiting
It's always the worst part.
I remember that vividly, awaiting a return. Oh my God, it's gonna be Robert Thomas. It's gonna be Jordan Kyrou. Oh my goodness. Come to find out, just at the time, just Tage Thompson, Patrick Berglund, and Vladimir Sobotka. Might have been a pick in there as well. At the time, seemed like an absolute heist. And then fast forward a season. Ryan O'Reilly's got that famous picture, black background with like 6 different trophies in front of him. Stanley Cup, Conn Smythe, Selke Trophy, Western Conference Championship, obviously. Seemed like one of the biggest, most lopsided trades of all time. And then all of a sudden, Tage Thompson gets a regular role with the Buffalo Sabres this year and decides to go for like 35 goals. Where did that come from? I mean, you saw it coming. I know you have a tweet from like 5 years ago calling him a first-line center. But
I was a big fan of Tage.
The narrative has now... You have that jersey, too.
I do. Still in the closet.
The narrative has now somehow arisen that the Blues lost that trade. Which, first of all, before I dish to you, Tommy, I'm just going to start with the fact that there can be trades where nobody loses. That's the whole point of a trade in hindsight, is both teams benefit. Tage Thompson was a guy that wasn't getting his role with the St. Louis Blues, probably still wouldn't have gotten a proper role with the St. Louis Blues if he was here today. He would have had a crowded depth chart to climb up. And the St. Louis Blues got Ryan O'Reilly, who tied a record of Wayne Gretzky by scoring in 5 consecutive Stanley Cup Finals games, alongside a Selke Trophy, alongside a Stanley Cup and Conn Smythe Trophy. St. Louis Blues couldn't have won anymore. And now all of a sudden the Buffalo Sabres seem like they have one of the better young centers in the NHL in Tage Thompson. This can't be anything more than a win-win. And as much as, you want to be bitter and go, oh, I wish we still had Tage Thompson, we really going to sit here and complain that the Blues gave up a center that would maybe be on the third line for them right now, all things considered?
Yeah, so I don't know if you caught it on the timeline or not, Josh, but I was fighting for my life, trying to defend my take on this, which I haven't seen a lot of people call it a potential lose for the St. Louis Blues, but there has been a lot of conversation about it. So I just want to say I am 100% with you that it's a win-win. I've seen some people say that it is a landslide victory for the St. Louis Blues solely for the reason that they ended up with the Stanley Cup. And that's where I'm like, okay, let's back up the Brinks truck just a little bit here because Tage Thompson is an absolute stud. And if it ends up that he's like one of the leading scorers for the Buffalo Sabres franchise all time and they hang his jersey in the rafters, like just because the Blues ended up getting a Stanley Cup out of it doesn't mean you can call it a landslide. You can absolutely call it a win. And I don't think there's any scenario where this trade ends up being a loss for the Blues. But I still don't think it's a landslide. I think it worked out for both teams, like you're talking about. And Ryan O'Reilly, like, just to put this in even more perspective of how this can't really be a landslide, like the last couple of years, including this one, Ryan O'Reilly's numbers offensively have been down, right? He's up in his 30s now, and he's going to be due for a new contract and free agency. And there's a possibility the Blues don't bring him back. Now, is that likely? Probably not, to get rid of your captain again after they let Backes go, after they let Pietrangelo go. You're going to do that again with O'Reilly? I'm not really sure, especially because I still think he can play a viable role in the bottom six if he's not scoring offensively. He can be like that Alexander Steen guy that still shuts people down, right? But that being said, like, Tage Thompson's 24, and he's got a lot of years ahead of him. And if he's scoring 30 goals consistently to the end of his career, like, that moves the needle a lot more in the middle for the Buffalo Sabres than initially, like you were talking about when people were saying, oh, Doug Armstrong's done it again, absolutely pulled the sheets over the Buffalo Sabres. I think that narrative's kind of gone out the window. Yeah. And that's really where my head's at with this whole thing.
Yeah. And okay, I got 2 points. One is a bit of a 2-part question for you, Tommy, to kind of dispel any sort of narrative that the Blues lost this trade in any sense. First question. Do the Blues win a Stanley Cup without Ryan O'Reilly?
No.
Do the Blues obtain Ryan O'Reilly without trading Tage Thompson?
No. Unless you're trading Robert Thomas or Jordan Kyrou.
Let's close the book on that discussion.
But here's the thing too that I'm wondering, right? If let's say that the Blues don't make that trade and Ryan O'Reilly ends up not coming here, but they still have Tage Thompson. I don't think they win a Stanley Cup. Like, it's not as viable, but I think they're still in a good position.
Oh, absolutely.
But like you said, that would take a lot of things lining up and the stars aligning for Tage Thompson to get the opportunity here that he did with the Sabres. And I don't think he really would be able to because Robert Thomas's emergence,
right?
Like, Robert Thomas would be higher on the depth chart, so he'd get a chance before Tage.
Right.
And if he showed flashes and was absolutely lighting it up, like, at what point do you get Tage in there? So.
Right. And the other thing is, and this isn't to rip on Tage Thompson or the Buffalo Sabres, but with any NHL team, someone's got to score. You know what I mean? And I think you could take Robert Thomas and give him the role that Tage Thompson has on the Buffalo Sabres right now, and he'd be going for 100 points. You know what I'm saying? Like, this isn't to rip on Tage Thompson and discount the year that he's having, but the Blues were able to trade a guy like Tage Thompson because they had so many other guys that could fill his role. So many guys about his age that, as we're seeing right now, Ivan Barbashev, Robert Thomas, Jordan Kyrou, whatever, that could be that young transitional guy. It was an expendable piece at the time, and as much as it would be nice to add Tage Thompson to this, you know, amazing offense that the Blues have, like I said, if he were on this team right now and he continued his development, I'm not so convinced that he would have been able to play his way above Robert Thomas or Braden Shen or Ryan O'Reilly. I don't see a timeline where Tage Thompson stays on this team and is able to have
pigeonholed.
Yeah, and not to say that he's only having a 35-goal season because he's on the Buffalo Sabres and nobody's scoring, but sometimes it takes, you know, being on a team like that where they don't have a ton of offensive talent, where you can kind of be the guy and score a ton of goals before you sort of fit into a more high-powered offense. You know, I think Tage Thompson right now is maybe the best offensive player on the Buffalo Sabres, close to it. He wouldn't be that on the Blues, so he just wouldn't have the opportunity to score 35 goals. Maybe in 4 years he'll have the potential to be the best offensive player on any team that he's on. But right now, I think he's benefiting off of the fact that he's on a poor team, and that's good for him. That's why you make a trade like that. That's the whole change of scenery argument. Is sometimes guys need to have that sort of independence on a team and figure their individual game out before they can play with other super talented guys. Win for Buffalo, win for St. Louis, win for Tage Thompson. End of story.
See, I feel like it's more beneficial for Tage Thompson to be like, he'd get more points on a team like the Blues because they score way more goals. Like maybe they're divvied up among different people a lot more than it is with the Sabres. But I feel like Buchnevich is having a career year. Tarasenko's having one of his best years. Like I feel like all the offensive production that kind of lingers around the St. Louis Blues. I mean, you could bring in me playing center for the Blues, and I'd end up getting 5 points on a night somehow by the stroke of God. So it's just like, I don't know. I get what you're saying too. When you're the number one guy and guys are just feeding you and relying on you to be evidently like the point production for the entire team, you're going to get a lot of good looks, but you're also going to get a lot of good looks from the other team's defense too. And I think, I don't know, it's an interesting dynamic. So maybe that can be the YouTube question of the day.
Yeah. I mean, and like I said, I don't want anyone to come away from that little end of the segment thinking that I'm trying to discount Tage Thompson's performance or anything like that. It's more so just like different situations are good for different players. Look at William Karlsson in Vegas. He was a third line player, gets picked up by Vegas in the expansion draft and goes and scores 40 goals. I don't think there was a single Columbus Blue Jackets fan that was bitter to see him do that. I'm so stoked that Tage Thompson is doing what he's doing over in Buffalo. You can't hate something like that. The Blues got a Stanley Cup out of that, and now the Buffalo Sabres got something out of it, because we all know that Patrick Berglund and Vladimir Sobotka aren't going to have some sort of an impact. So, you know what? If my team lost a guy like Ryan O'Reilly, I would want something to show for it. So I'm happy that the Sabres aren't getting completely fleeced, as much as it was fun to laugh at and fun to make fun of. It's a little bit more wholesome this way.
I want the Sabres to be good, honestly. That would be good for the league.
Yeah, Buffalo hockey fans are crazy. That area is so nice. I love those Buffalo home uniforms. That color pops like crazy. Owen Power looks like an absolute animal. 6'6", skates like he's like 5'10".
Yeah, he really locked down Vladimir Tarasenko the other night. Didn't look out of place at all.
Okay.
Did get a point though, so props to the kid. I mean, that's a tall task.
Yeah, but he's got a lot of potential for sure. Anyways, that being said, we ran a little bit long on this first segment. Get a little riled up about trades, I guess. That being said, we got a huge game in like less than 12 hours, actually.
God.
No, less than 24 hours, I should say.
12 hours. 6 a.m. game.
No, less than 24 hours, I should say. Friday night, brain is gone. St. Louis Blues take on I believe they're still tied in the standings, unless the Wild are playing today. St. Louis Blues and Minnesota Wild are neck and neck in the standings. Most likely going to be meeting up in round one of the playoffs, and they play tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern in a huge matinee game. So we're going to be getting into that in the second segment. Before that, I want to tell you guys about our good friends over at Built Bar. Now, Built Bars are delicious. You've heard me talk about them all the time. And they also have a brand new product called Built Puffs, which are protein-infused marshmallows. They're so delicious. They're fluffy. They're marshmallowy, and they're not just a protein bar. Built Puffs and all Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate, and they're all low-calorie, high-protein. You can replace your candy bars with these. They're better. A typical candy bar can be anywhere from 200 to 300 calories. So, Tommy, I was down in my apartment lobby about 20 minutes ago, and there's a little area where people that have food kits get their packages delivered. And there was a huge Built Bar package sitting there. So someone here at my apartment knows about Built Bar.
All right. Listen to the pod.
There you go. They must have used code LOCKED15, because when you use code LOCKED15 at built.com, you'll get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. And we'll be right back with the second segment of today's episode. right, Tommy. So, arguments aside, hypothetical trades aside, Blues have a big game tomorrow. Maybe the biggest game since they've started. Not maybe. The biggest game since they've been on this 11-game point streak, this 7-game win streak. They're taking on the Minnesota Wild, who did you confirm that we're still tied in the standings with them?
Yep, still tied.
Yeah. Dead even in the standings. Less than 10 games left for both teams. Huge game tomorrow. Game one, technically, of the playoffs between these two teams, because it is pretty much inevitable that these teams are going to meet up in the playoffs, unless Nashville goes on a huge run and St. Louis or Minnesota loses out the rest of the season. These two teams are going to meet in the playoffs, more than likely, and they know that. So tomorrow's game is going to be a pretty big feeling out process for the way that these two teams are going to match up in the playoffs. Tommy, what are you looking to see as sort of a trailer for this round one playoff series, more than likely?
Well, I think with the way that the Blues have been playing, they're absolutely going to bring it in the first period. I think they've been talking about getting off to hot starts. That's something that they've been adamant about on this win streak, is getting on top of teams and not playing from behind. But even when they have had to play from behind, they've been able to do so. So I expect the Blues to jump out on top of them, kind of following the path that's paved by the Blues offense and has been, especially that Buchnevich, Thomas, and Tarasenko line. I mean, like we talked about on the last pod, that's the best line in hockey, no doubt. But Minnesota's got some firepower too. Fiala is on an absolute bender right now, and Kirill Kaprizov is always dangerous. So there's some guys you got to look out for over there. Thankfully, the Blues have Ryan O'Reilly to shut them down. But it's absolutely, I mean, both teams know what's at stake here, and they both know that this is a massive game. So if you're looking for anything less than playoff atmosphere hockey, you've come to the wrong place. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it's going to be sort of game one of a quote-unquote 8-game series, you know?
Pretty
because, much. I mean, there's, like I said before, I'm totally imagining this clip being played back when we don't play the Minnesota Wild in round one somehow, but there's basically no way we don't play this team in round one. It's as close to locked in as it could be without it being statistically inevitable. Like, the Colorado Avalanche are 10 points up on both the Blues and the Wild, and then the Nashville Predators are about, I think 8 points back of both these teams. It's going to happen. And these teams know that is the thing. You know, they're not checking it as much as you and I are, Tommy, or people at home are. But someone in both of these organizations has looked at the standings in the past week and goes, this Saturday's game is going to be a big one. So not only have the Blues been playing playoff, intensity hockey the last few weeks, few games, whatever, they're now going to be playing playoff intensity hockey in a way that we'll probably see repeated in about 2 weeks against this very same team in the Minnesota Wild. And I guess my question for you is, do you think that the way that the Blues have been playing is 1-to-1 with what they're going to look like in the playoffs? Or do you think there's still a little bit of ramping up to do?
Well, so here's a funny story about that, actually. One of my buddies ran into Craig Berube at the Frontenac Starbucks this morning and was talking to him about the team. And Craig Berube said, yeah, they're rocking and rolling right now, but just wait because they got something else coming. So evidently there's something else left in the tank that Craig Berube thinks these guys are still not playing to their full capacity, which, I mean, playoffs are a completely different beast like you're talking about. But, I mean, the Blues have had Minnesota's number for a hot minute now. I mean, you could date back to the
2 seasons,
the Winter Classic. You can date all the way back to 3 seasons. It's 11-0-1 in their last 12 meetings or something ridiculous. I don't know. Don't fact check me on that. But every time, it doesn't even matter. Even going back to last season, Minnesota was a much better team than we were in terms of standings, in terms of point production and goal totals, all of that stuff. And we were struggling and sputtering all season long. But every time we played them, we came away with a dub. And I feel like that has to play into this somehow, right? Even if the Blues go into the game and they start going down or whatever, like there's always that confidence in the back of your mind that it's like, oh, we'll be fine. It's the Wild, like we always beat them. And maybe that's probably how like Minnesota views us, is like how we viewed Chicago for so long. Is like, God, it doesn't matter like what we do when it comes to playoff time. Like we just cannot beat this team until the Troy Brouwer goal. So
bring it back to
huge for them.
That Jake Allen series where he pretty much single-handedly stole the show against the Wild. They won in like what, 5, 6?
Yeah, I
maybe
think so. I think it was 5.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, I think that's honestly a pretty good comparison. I don't think the playoff matchups are quite as plentiful as the St. Louis Chicago thing was. But hey, that's why we have this bogus wild card thing anyways, to facilitate these non-existent divisional rivalries. So who knows? Maybe we got the start of one. Maybe Colorado is going to consistently be the head honcho of this division, and St. Louis and Minnesota are going to be 2 and 3 for years to come. But I mean, yeah, the teams match up really well. I think they have a very similar style of play, which would make for a very interesting playoff series. And like I said, I think tomorrow is going to be as close to what game 1 of the Stanley Cup playoffs is going to look like that you could get in the regular season. I think there's definitely a part of both of these teams that are going to be approaching it like that and going in with, maybe let's not show our full hand because we're going to be seeing these guys again in a few weeks. So that sort of ramping up that you're talking about, not to say that the Blues are going to lay off or anything like that, but I wouldn't be surprised to see them focus a little bit more on the matchups, a little bit more on like the nitty gritty, the X's and O's. And really focus on exploiting the Wild's weaknesses. Should be fun. That being said, though, the Blues also have a game on Sunday. So in this third and final segment, we're going to kind of combine the two. And Tommy, we're going to introduce a brand new segment, and I'm going to ask you for your locked on player of the weekend.
Oh, I like that.
Because back-to-back games kind of combined into one because they're both division rivals. And if things go real poorly for the Blues, we could be looking at a bit of an uphill battle to get home ice advantage in the playoffs. So big weekend for the Blues. We're going to be getting into that. Now, I made the bold claim that if the Blues come away with a continued point streak after this weekend, if they earn points in both these games, that this team would be Western Conference Finals bound. And if you think I might be right, you got to put your money where your mouth is and check out betonline.net, because betonline.net is your number one source for all your betting stats and sports info. You can find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs and the start of the Major League Baseball season. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. We'll be right back to wrap up today's episode. All right, Tommy. So these early afternoon-ish games are always tough for hockey teams. Whenever you're not playing, at like 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, it's always a little bit of a shock to the system. Blues are doing that on Saturday. They're playing at 3 p.m. Eastern. And then Sunday they're doing the same thing, playing around dinner time, 6 p.m. Eastern. So 2 abnormally scheduled games that are going to throw off the routines of the players, and also 2 games against division rivals that have huge playoff implications. The Blues can come away with this weekend with a 4-point advantage on home ice advantage in the first round, or they could be 4 points back of securing home ice advantage in the first round, or maybe only 2 points back. I'm not sure if Minnesota plays 2 games as well, but either way, we're going to have so we're going to have a very clear outlook on the playoffs on Monday, who the Blues are playing, but also if they're starting out at home or on the road. And the Blues have been a very good team at home this season, struggled a little bit on the road. So big implications. That being said, Tommy, we don't really have a ton of time to talk about the Nashville game in isolation, but I think they're
going to lose, for the record,
against Nashville.
I think they're going to empty the tank. Well, also Binnington is going to be back in net. I don't think he's going to be a problem, but I don't know if he's built up enough momentum yet to where he provides the impact that Ville Husso does. Even though I think he's getting there for sure, and we know what he's capable of in a Stanley Cup run. But I think the Blues, like you alluded to, know that their home record is really good and know that they want to be at home and have home ice advantage throughout the playoffs. And so they're going to prioritize the Minnesota game, empty the tank in that game, and then it being a back-to-back against the Predators. Like, the Predators are a good team. They're going to take advantage of a back-to-back matchup against a Blues team that is probably going to be gassed after giving it everything they got against the Wild. So I'm going to go 1-1 split in this weekend.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a pretty logical scenario. I think, like I said, if you treat Saturday like a playoff game, we know how hard guys play in the playoffs. To come around and play 27 hours later is a very tall task, especially against a team as good as Nashville, a team that, you know, is in your division, knows how you play, knows your strengths, knows your weaknesses. Blues definitely have their work cut out for them. But I would argue, like I said, that exactly for the reasons that you said the Blues will probably lose. If the Blues somehow come out of this earning points in both games or even earning wins in both games, invincible.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah, like they should absolutely do exactly what you said and empty the tank against Minnesota and then probably lose to Nashville, because that's logical. You know, you can't win every game. And if there's a game to empty the tank against, a game to empty the tank in, it's a 3:00 afternoon game against a playoff opponent that is tied with you in the standings with less than 10 games to go in the regular season. That is textbook definition, empty the tank 110% and then punt Sunday. But the flip side of that is also, if the Blues offense is as good as we say it is, what's stopping them from putting up 5 goals on Saturday, 5 goals on Sunday, and come out of this weekend 2-0?
You're not wrong. So, okay, so here's my question for you, Josh, is obviously I think we're both on the same page that Robert Thomas has been the MVP for this second half of the Blues season, all season, all like this whole stretch of games, this win streak. He's just been a nightmare on Elm Street pretty much for anyone trying to guard him. Tarasenko as well. So let's say outside of Vladimir Tarasenko and Robert Thomas, who should be your locked on players of the weekend, who is your locked on players of the weekend besides those guys?
I'm glad you asked. I'm going with a guy that got a lot of praise from us throughout the season and has kind of taken a back seat as the defense as a whole has kind of come to its form, and that is Justin Faulk. Justin Faulk has had consistently one of the best seasons for anyone on the St. Louis Blues defense. And we've seen it a lot recently in games where the Blues have really been giving up a lot of opportunities. He has a tremendous awareness with his stick in the defensive zone, especially on the penalty kill. He does a really, really good job of taking advantage of opportunities to sort of get in the passing lane and stuff like that. And I think Justin Faulk is going to be sort of the 1B defenseman for the St. Louis Blues in terms of being relied on as that guy behind Colton Parayko. But I think he's relied on a little bit more than Parayko in the sense that he's also been contributing offensively. And with both the Minnesota Wild and the Nashville Predators, I think these games are so even, that these teams are so even, that it's going to really rely on what can push that needle just a little bit more. And if I'm the Minnesota Wild, I've scouted Robert Thomas. I've scouted Vladimir Tarasenko. I've scouted Ryan O'Reilly. I know what to expect. But what you're not expecting is Justin Faulk sort of creeping down that back door for that one-timer that he's kind of patented so much. He scored like 3 or 4 goals off of that in the past 2 weeks, not to mention his play in the defensive zone. So I think it's going to kind of come down to those 3rd and 4th stars, the guys that you don't game plan for as much, the guys that you kind of that aren't on your radar. And I think Justin Faulk is a great example. I also want to give a shout out to Nick Leddy. He had this one play in that last game where the who'd we play last? The Buffalo Sabres had like a 2-on-1 where he kind of made a turnover, and then he sprinted back and broke up the shot like right before they got the shot off. Just tremendous play. Nick Leddy, huge shout out, but Justin Faulk's my lockdown player of the weekend. But I kind of want to give it to that whole sort of defenseman not named Colton Parayko, because I think it's going to really come down to those guys to push the needle a little bit past where it's going to be.
That's funny that you say that, because my lockdown player of the weekend is Colton Parayko.
Hey,
because
I think with him.
So I think he's had a strong second half of the season, but from what we've seen this season with Colton Parayko, you really get like one of two guys. One version of him, he's breaking pucks out of the zone, skating like an absolute horse, using his stride to his advantage, protecting pucks, patrolling the blue line, being physical, winning those board battles. And the other version of him is a little bit more passive and less engaged. And I think against teams like Minnesota and against teams like Nashville that are in your division, that are playoff hungry, you can absolutely be exposed in those areas if Parayko shows up and is a little bit more passive than the alter ego of him, I guess. So I'm looking for a strong game from Parayko, and if Parayko has a strong game, Robert Thomas continues to be absolutely on fire. Vladimir Tarasenko continues to be playing out of his mind hockey, and Buchnevich is there to hold down the fort as well as the rest of the offense. I think the chips will fall in the Blues' direction, and they'll come away with a dub.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a very telling weekend, especially tomorrow. I'm really looking at tomorrow's game as a big indicator of can the Blues, just flip that switch and turn on playoff intensity. Maybe we'll get a little bit of a sense of that extra gear that Craig Berube was alluding to this morning in the coffee shop. Coffee shop? I'm not familiar.
Coffee shop. Starbucks.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Starbucks in Frontenac.
Gotcha. Dude, missed that detail.
With Starbucks.
I heard. Well, you said some town that I had never heard of.
I know. I'm just
that threw me for a loop. The whole Starbucks part kind of just went in one ear and out the other. I just heard you say a collection of syllables. I'm like, what? So, anyways, that being said, I think that's all the time we got for you guys today, and all the time we got for you guys this week. When we talk to you again, it will be Monday, and we will have a pretty good idea of the Blues playoff picture, because huge games this weekend, like we've said a million times on this episode. So make sure you guys are subscribed to whatever podcast platform you're listening to. That way, on Monday, when we're having probably a pretty visceral reaction to the weekend slate of games, you'll be the first ones to know, because I'm sure we're gonna have some heated opinions one way or the other.
It'll be electric one way or the other, I'll tell you.
Look, we've had a real solid string of positivity laced episodes. The positive vibes are immaculate. I would really like to be able to sit down Monday's episode when I'm coming up with a title and have it be another positive headline, because I didn't like those negative ones, not at all. I'm liking this new trend, so fingers crossed we can keep that up for Saturday and Sunday's games. That being said, the only way you'll find out our reactions is by hitting that follow or subscribe button on whatever podcast platform you're listening to us on. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube. We are back on YouTube with this episode. Took a day off yesterday, but back in action, more crystal clear than ever. Subscribe to us there. Hit that notification bell. Leave a comment down below. Follow us on all our socials: Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok at Locked On Blues. Follow me on Twitter at Josh Hyman NHL. Follow Tommy at TWelcher15. Thanks so much for listening. As always, let's go Blues.